Hi, everybody. How are you? Welcome. I'm so excited about today's webinar. This is probably my favorite topic because it's really the nitty gritty and like nuts and bolts of how we got programmed, how we can reprogram, how we can create change and transformation in our lives. So, this is not only one of the most important workbooks and one of the most important courses in here, but and I would say like the post-traumatic growth course is probably as powerful, if not more powerful than this course, but it's sort of like you want to do the early course first. um Hello, April. Oh, Aprizi. Hello, Halima. So today is our official 1 year. Is today the second? No, yesterday. So our official 1 year was yesterday of being up and launched. I was running a personal development school in person for a long time before, and running classes and courses and doing workshops and seminars. But it's like so much better to do online because then it's accessible to everybody, and it's like so much easier instead of doing all these event spaces and all these different things. So I'm so grateful to every single one of you who have been on this journey and who have been doing this work. And it is a huge blessing for me to see, week over week, like the questions and the insights and the shares that people bring. And I know that people are really working hard and doing a fantastic job here as well. So, okay, so today we're going to go through this workbook. It is a long workbook. I will do a second version because I'm highly suspicious that we will get through all of this today. But what I really want to highlight in this workbook, and we're going to talk about this a lot in the advanced core wounds courses, because we're going to go more into core wounds and their impact and like how they show up and how to tell our core wounds, other people's core wounds, different dynamics around core wounds. And we'll go a lot into different angles for reprogramming your core wounds. But what we're going to go through today in this specific webinar is we're going to put a high focus on the emotional processing tool, because I really think if we can get this tool down and we can really understand this tool and use it, it has the power to transform everything. I would say this is something that I kind of came up with when I was learning in my journey, and going through some really profound changes and learning and education from my perspective. And I kind of came up with this tool because I learned that our stories and our needs are the two things that cause emotional suffering and pain. And all I did to heal myself, through a huge part of my journey, was just do this tool every single day, almost obsessively. Like every time I felt dysregulated, I would apply this. And I didn't even do any belief reprogramming at the beginning. I did a little bit later on. But this was one of the most important things. So I talk about this tool a lot. I push it a lot. I put it in a whole bunch of different courses. I want to put a high focus on this today, but I'm going to go through and just give you guys an overview up until that point of some of the different exercises, some really good tips and tools. Ask questions. We'll do it together. All that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited you guys are all here. Thank you for being here. Hi, Jerry's and Rochelle and Tiffany and Minerva and Natalie and Tiffany Mahan. Two Tiffany's in here. Hello. And Magni and Merlin. Hi, guys. And Jamie and Sarah. Hello. Um, and hello again, Tony. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start, and I'm going to give you guys a moment to pull up your emotional processing workbook. We do have the fillable version already in the course. We also have the, not just the fillable version now in the courses, but we also have the workbook modules in there. I don't know if my team split them up per module. Like you might see, for example, like exercise 1 is in module 1 of the course, or if they have put the whole module as a single module at the end, like just a full workbook module where it's just me going through the workbook with you guys. So I would give that a check. I have to confirm with them tomorrow, but we have it for the emotional mastery course, the needs course, the boundaries course, soon to be the enmeshment course, and transforming codependency. And we're going to keep putting them up as we go, so you guys have that extra support for integration. So a huge thank you, by the way, to Preezy for all of your kind words. So I'll answer a couple questions, and then just to give you guys an opportunity to pull everything up, and then we'll just dive right in. I can't wait to go through this with you guys today. So Tiffany says, hi, Thais, is a high need for attention tied to beliefs around not being good enough? It can be tied to beliefs around not being good enough, yes, and this is your way of equilibrating, absolutely. Or it can be tied, and it can be both, to a high need for significance. And that can be because there was a lack of significance that your mind perceived and yet made positive associations to in childhood. So if you have a belief that, oh, I'm not significant, or I'm not getting seen, heard, made to feel important or significant as a child, but I see the value in that, then the brain will have a void, and then the brain is designed to equilibrate and fill that void. So what will then happen as a byproduct is you'll probably put a lot of emphasis on significance long term. So great question. And Tony says, oh, you're just saying hi to Magni. Yes, we've got a lot of people here since right from the beginning, and it's so exciting. I'm so happy you guys are still here. Wow. Kelly just returned from a 4,000-mile road trip. Wow. My long-term relationship ex was my travel companion. Wow. It has taken us 3 years to build a friendship, and now we are like family. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Let's see. Ben says, happy to be in this webinar, getting better over the past few months with emotional inventory and being true to how I feel, but could be a lot better with it. That's amazing though. That's like, because I know you're a DA, so those are huge strides, because that's one of the hardest things that you'll go through. And Nyla says, I second that. It's been the most impactful course for me so far. I think it's the one I'll keep revisiting. Yeah. And honestly, from all of this, if you can dive into that, I completed it back in March and use the tool all the time, several times a week. Game changer, but it's nice for me to get more details from Tyson webinars. Amazing. This is like, I will promote, because anybody can do this tool, and that we'll go through in the workbook today, and we're going to make sort of like a central focus. It's extremely, extremely effective for regulating. And if we do it repetitively, then it becomes really effective for reprogramming as well. So excited to hear this. Okay, so let me just see. I'll answer a couple other questions. So Nyla says, is there a danger with reprogramming that I'm ignoring my own toxic behavior? I'm focusing on why I was good enough. Could I be missing things I actually was doing wrong? So generally when we have a wound, we hyper focus in that area. So generally when we have a wound, our reticular activating system is sort of like focused in on that wound. So you're probably looking all the time at how you are not good enough, right? So part of what we're trying to do is equilibrate it so we return to a fair and balanced perception, and we can see, okay, sure, that wasn't good enough, or I could have done better, but I am good enough in all these areas, and we're not like taking something so personally and just seeing through a one-sided lens. But a step further than that, and arguably much more important than that, we have room to digest external criticism when we're not so busy criticizing ourselves. And so what I find, without exception, is the more we are not seeing through that wound, we don't need to defend. So if somebody comes along and says, hey, you didn't do this well enough, then what usually takes place is when we don't have this belief that we're not good enough as a human, that the person just triggered, then we actually have space to be like, oh, did I not do that well enough? How could I be better? And we have room to explore. So what I find as a result of reprogramming is actually the opposite, that it tends to open people up, because you have to imagine, if I'm criticizing myself in my mind all day, then when somebody else comes along and says that to me or criticizes me, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's excruciating. It's so painful. But if I'm in a position where I'm not doing that, and then somebody criticizes, it's the first drop in my bucket of criticism for the day. And so it's not that important, right? Then I actually have room to step back and to consider and be like, okay, is this, valid criticism, and where could this be true? And so usually when we do the reprogramming, we actually become less sensitive to criticism, and as a byproduct of that, it becomes easier to focus on what we could be improving, and we can see ourselves more clearly. So it's a great question, but pretty much without exception, I find it goes in the opposite direction. Hello, Merlin and Claire and Rosette. Hello from Puerto Rico. Hello, hello. And Jody, amazing. Yeah, it's an exciting course from Tel Aviv. Wow. Hello, Jody. That's amazing. Okay, so let's dive right in. Okay, so the very first part of this workbook is really designed, like I often set the courses up for, is really designed for you to be able to take inventory and get really clear. And the importance of taking inventory is that what we do is we make the subconscious content conscious. And we can't work to reprogram anything at the subconscious level if we are not making things conscious and available so that we can recognize our patterns, we can see them, we can understand where they come from. We can't change what we don't know needs to be changed, right? We can't change the unknown unknowns. So the very beginning of this, in the first couple of pages, is all about organizing your perceptual filter. So really recognizing like what beliefs you're carrying, what's shaping your life. And so I really want to highlight like a difference here for a moment. We have our core beliefs, and we can have core beliefs about certain things, but we can have our core I am beliefs. And this is the chart that you see all the time. I am helpless, I am not good enough, I am unworthy, I am disliked, these sorts of things. And where I found these core beliefs, just to give you guys context, because I don't talk about this too much, is that in working with, I spent a long time in my practice, and I was very blessed. My practice filled up like very, very quickly. And at the same time, I probably still had a little bit of boundary work to do when I started my practice. And so I had a hard time. People would be like, please, this is helping me so much. Can you please see my brother? My brother is going through so much pain. Please, can you see my mother? Please. And so I ended up for a long period of time as I started my practice seeing like 40 people a week, 60 people a week, sometimes in these hour-long slots, like really, your average person in this sort of field, it is recommended you see like 12 people a week. And so I probably had lots of boundary work to do still. I had healed in all these other areas, but had to figure that out. But what I found, and what was extremely beneficial out of that, which I figured out, I had to set those boundaries a few years in. What I found was that I was really able to recognize patterns because I was seeing so many people and seeing so many patterns within like a larger subset of people. And what I realized is that a lot of people, their meaning, these stories we tell, if I keep asking, like, okay, and what does that mean? And what does that mean? Or why is that bad? It would always boil down to the same core wounds. And so people would be like, I felt really upset. I felt really hurt the other day, when my friends didn't call me back and they went out to lunch together. And so what does that mean, or why is that bad? Okay, well, it means that, they didn't care about me. Okay, and what does that mean, or why is that bad? Well, and so you'd see, like, if you kept asking questions, it would start as like, well, I felt upset that I wasn't at lunch. I felt like I wasn't important. And it would get to like these core meanings that we give to things. So our core wounds are our beliefs about ourselves. And when people are triggering or activating them, it's obviously extremely painful because we're not just experiencing the pain from not being at lunch, we're experiencing the pain from not being at lunch combined with all of the subconsciously stored emotion from our past experiences that are now being activated. And it's like our subconscious mind is flooding them to the surface. And you have to remember, your subconscious mind stores every memory ever with all the emotion intact. And it consolidates memories over time. And sometimes we change our perceptions and memories over time. But usually, even as that's happening, it kind of tends to consolidate or shift memories according to the emotional tones that are originally there. So your mind might make memories bigger and more emotional because of a tone. So it doesn't take the emotion out when that happens, if that makes sense, which means we're like a storage cabinet of emotions, and people can come in and push our buttons and lots of things can flood to the surface unless we go in, make peace, reprogram, change our stored perceptions of ourselves or memories in and of themselves by making new emotional associations from those memories, which we talk a lot about in the post-traumatic growth course. So this is like the framework of how everything works. Okay, so with that being said, I'm very excited to talk about this. So with that being said, the first exercise as we start going into inventory is about understanding your perceptions, understanding like what your filter of your subconscious mind that you see and interact with the world through is made up of. And so the purpose of this exercise, if you open your workbook or take a look, is to create intentions for each of the 7 areas of life and then make conscious the limiting beliefs that you have in these areas. So limiting beliefs are just general beliefs I carry. So it could be that, the world is too competitive. I'm not going to excel in the workplace. Like if you're looking at career, core beliefs are the core I am beliefs. Well, the world's too competitive and I'm not good enough, right? So these things intertwine. So in your discovery and the actual exercise, what you're going to do here and what the purpose is to go through and write out as specifically as you can goals that you have in the 7 areas of life. And you have to look at this as if anything is possible. So you're making goals as if you could truly achieve anything and it was guaranteed. And sometimes people will live their whole lives without thinking this way. And I notice it's because sometimes we fear giving ourselves permission to really look at what we truly desire, because we fear that then we're going to be a failure, or then we're not going to have the capacity to move in that direction, or, we're not good enough to achieve these things. And so we rob ourselves from the potential to truly create a life that we desire and that we would dream of because we are unwilling to actually look. And another big reason this can happen is if you had a childhood that was really constricting. So let's say, for example, you weren't allowed to make decisions, you weren't allowed, maybe you had two authoritarian parents, or maybe you had really neglectful parents and you just felt like your efforts weren't seen and heard and recognized. Sometimes we can form this belief that's like, well, why bother? Or I can't make my own decisions anyways because everything's controlled by outside of me. And so sometimes as a result of that as well, we can stop giving ourselves permission to dream, to look, to find out what we desire. And so, this exercise one here, has a lot to do with you giving yourself permission to think and feel about what you would like to create in each of the 7 areas of life, and to try to do so from like an unlimited perspective, like as if anything was possible. What would I do? How would I show up? What would I desire? And then the second part of this exercise, and I am going to go through these at a bit of a higher level because you have the full workbook module and we'll spend more time like interacting and asking questions. But the second part of this exercise is for you to then ask yourself the question, so then why haven't I achieved this yet? And what should come out of that is all of the limiting beliefs that you carry. So for example, you might say, my career, I want to start my own business, right? So let's say you write that out. I'm trying to do this with you guys so that I don't go too fast. So let's say you're like, I'm going to start my own business. And why haven't I achieved starting my own business yet? And maybe you go, because I don't have enough time, because too many people in my life need my support, because, that would conflict with what my parents think I should be doing, because that would take time away from my relationship. So whatever your stories are relative to your dream is your limiting belief in this area of life. Does that make sense? Right? So then your limiting belief is, I don't have enough time, or it's too difficult, or the world's too competitive, or whatever comes up for you in that area. So we'll just do one more as an example, just to give this like extra clarity. So let's say we won't say financial, let's just say relationships. So let's say your relationships in the romantic area of life is I want to have a healthy, securely attached relationship. Okay. And then I'm writing this out with you. So I want to have a healthy, securely attached relationship. And then you ask yourself, so why have I not done that already? And then maybe you say, because there aren't enough good attachment styles out there. There aren't enough secure people out there. Or because it's so hard to date nowadays. Dating apps ruin everything. And like I hear you, I hear lots of stories about how dating apps are difficult and all these different things. But at the same time, I know people, I can tell you 15, 20 people right away who found somebody on a dating app and got married, or who never did a dating app and found a great person anyways in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s. There is like a really there are, and I won't share people's stuff, but like there's a really sweet couple in here who are members of the school, who I think they're like 85 and 87, and they're doing this work together. And it's like the sweetest thing. So, anything is possible. And they met each other not that long ago. So like, we can get into these spaces, but as long as we believe that way, our reticular activating system operates that way. And so our RAS is our filtering mechanism. So if we don't believe that it's possible to meet somebody, then we're not going to be paying attention. Our subconscious mind is not going to be picking up on people who exhibit secure behaviors. We defeat ourselves before we even start the race. And so it's really important that we take inventory in all areas of our lives so we can get really specific as to what we might be doing without our own conscious mind's recognition to defeat ourselves in advance before we even get started. And so this is a really important exercise for really diving in and recognizing those pieces, okay? So if you haven't done that or you want to do more of that, you can always go back and take a deep dive. If we look at exercise 2, we go further into our inventory. So we go further into like looking at all these different stories or belief patterns we might be carrying, not necessarily core beliefs, but stories in general. And I find that a lot of people have questions about this, so I'm going to go through and give a whole bunch of different examples, okay? So the purpose of this exercise, and I really urge everybody to follow along, is to make, again, the subconscious contents of your mind conscious by investigating perceptions, associations, any stories you have basically about these fundamental areas of life. Okay, so it's just a bit of a deeper dive as opposed to just the 7 areas, because as you know, I always say in here, like the more conscious we are about our subconscious stuff, the more isolated and specific we are about what we want to create change around, the faster it happens. So this is the work, right? So then we can use these things later to reprogram. So stories about men. And remember, if you don't have anything that comes to mind and you try to spend some time reflecting and you don't see it showing up in your behavior day to day, your life on a regular basis, then you just might not have limiting or negative stories in this area. Or if you just find yourself writing positive things, that's excellent. That means these areas of your life are in a good space where they're not like control, but you have programs that are working for you instead of against you. So if we take a look here, stories about men. So what are the stories I hear about men from so many different people over the years? I hear things like, um, men are cold, men aren't interested in long-term commitment, men always cheat, men can't be trusted, men just want to get in your pants, men don't have feelings, men, and the poor men in here listening to this, right? Like these things are not true. These are stories people make when they are afraid and they don't understand things, and the mind just wants to find some kind of security or safety somewhere. So sometimes when we give meaning to something and we put it in a box, it gives us a little bit of that. But long term, that can cause a lot more harm than good. So there can be endless stories. You could say men only like to wear pink t-shirts. Like you could say anything, but it's going to be really specific to your experience. And these are your unique stored associations in your own subconscious mind that you're getting in touch with, which is a beautiful blessing. Like you get to actually see yourself and see what framework you're working with. Okay. Women, what stories do we hear about women over the years? Women can't be trusted. Women only want your money. Women will cheat in relationships. Women are materialistic. Women are catty. Women are jealous. Women are competitive. All these different things, right? And you might have other really unique ones to your experience, but these are some really common stories that I've seen over the years. Okay. And again, these are not true. None of these things are explicitly true. There can be men and women who are untrustworthy. Absolutely. There can be men who um, don't want to be in a long-term relationship or do have more repressed feelings. There can be women who are more materialistic or who are trying to be in relationships for materialistic purposes, of course. But to believe that this is the world, and this is, you know, and if we carry these beliefs, we project them onto the world. If we carry these beliefs on some level subconsciously, we believe this applies and that this is how the world is and how it works. And then we have to ask ourselves, what world did we create for ourselves at the subconscious level? What world are we living in? Are we living in a world where all men are untrustworthy and all women are jealous? And if so, like, what does that feel like on a daily basis? If we don't reprogram that story, if we don't do something about that programming, that feels hard and painful and heavy and not good. And so we owe it to ourselves to heal these parts of ourselves. And we want to, again, return to like fair and balanced thinking, where, of course, some people will be like that. And we can always be cautious in our interactions and be mindful about red flags. But there can be really beautiful, amazing, good hearted people with great intentions too. and we're not going to overlay this belief onto all people so that we then miss out on those potentially really great, fulfilling, rewarding experiences that can exist, right? So I'll go through a few more. So marriage is scary. Marriage doesn't work. People get stuck and trapped in marriages long term. Um, Marriage is a financial institution. I've heard that one a lot. It's just for people to have financial experiences. Um, Marriage limits you. Marriage is scary. Um, People try to get married to trap each other. I hear all these sorts of different versions of things over the years. So you could have any other ones, but pick yours. See if any come up for you. Okay. This is like a super inventory exercise. Commitment. Commitment tends to sort of follow on the same lines in terms of stories. So it can be commitment never lasts, commitment doesn't work. People pretend they're committed and really they're cheating or they're not actually committed. People, here's a really good one that I see a lot. Commitment means that you have to be loyal to the point where you can never even find another person attractive, right? Or commitment means you're not allowed to emotionally bond with other people, right? Like if you're committed, you're not allowed, like, lots of those dynamics. For some people, that might be what they want in their relationship. But if you have two people who operate under those same context, under that same context, that could be okay. But, at the end of the day, if people are in a marriage for 30, 40, 50 years, it's going to be normal to think somebody else is attractive. But there's a difference between finding somebody attractive versus being attracted to versus acting on your attraction, right? Those are uniquely and profoundly separate things. So anyways, these are lots of, I think of so many people I talked to over the years and like ironing out these different things with people and the interesting things that come out of it, right? Because sometimes somebody says, oh, that's a beautiful woman or that's an attractive man, and the other partner thinks, oh, I can never trust this person again, they're cheating, the relationship's over, versus sometimes that can be coming from a space of being so involved in a relationship that it feels okay to have those conversations. For some people, it is something sketchy, right? So it's very unique to each person's circumstances. Okay, yourself in a relationship. These can be things like I'm unlovable, I'm disliked, I'm difficult, I am going to be abandoned, I am unique, I am special. Sometimes people can have things that separate them from these other perspectives, like I'm too special for a relationship, or I am nobody understands me in a relationship. Sometimes these are their own separate programs, um, sometimes we put walls up by thinking that way, right? Oh, or I don't know. There's so many things you could go through in terms of yourself, but just take inventory. And it can help too if you look at like the 7 areas of life. Like I'm too busy in my career for a relationship. I am not making enough money. I've seen a lot of people over the years too do things like, oh, I'm not making enough money to be attractive to somebody else in a relationship. I see men obviously do that a little bit more than women, but that's a really painful one. I don't have a good enough career to be in a relationship, and things like mentally, emotionally, I'm not smart enough to be in a relationship. I'm not emotionally regulated enough. Something's wrong with me. I can't be in a relationship. So take a look at just anything that causes a wall between you and other people unnecessarily. And these are the things that we want to strip down. This is the ego and the ego mind that's been here to try to protect us. And that's what it's largely developed out of, but it's also largely developed out of trying to protect us, but usually that's based on imprints from traumas that it's still holding on to and then reprojecting out onto the world, right? So really important to recognize that. So I won't keep going through all of this, but your needs in a relationship, my needs are too difficult, my needs are diminished, nobody cares about my needs, I only care about other people's needs in a relationship, my needs are weird or strange, nobody would understand them, like all these different stories that we can get into. Vulnerability is scary. Your partner's needs, my partner's needs are too much, they're too little, they don't express them. They only want to be about their needs. Vulnerability is scary, it's unsafe, it makes me weak, it's a big one. It makes me shameful. So you can go through all of this, and it's important to look through like sex is people just want sex in a relationship. Sex is never interesting long term. People will be bored sexually. I've heard that so many times. So go through and take a big look at like all the different things that can show up for you, okay? And again, your parents' marriage is a good place to recognize any patterns that you might think about marriage that you couldn't catch earlier, because a lot of these things tend to imprint us. What your beliefs are about friends of the opposite sex, household duties and rules, who should be doing what we can speak up about, communicate about, so on and so forth. So I hope this makes so much sense. And again, if you don't find yourself in a position where you're like, I don't think I have any limiting stories, try to observe your patterns of behavior over the week. Like, does anything show up for me and I'm just not recognizing it? Try to observe. But then if you find that, yeah, no, nothing really comes up that's negative, that's excellent. That just means you don't have a limiting belief there to work through. Okay. So in this next exercise, I'm going to kind of like glaze over this and then answer some questions. But in this next exercise, basically what you're trying to do in exercise 2, part 2, is to like reflect on how these things impact you. And you can do this by looking at the cost. You can do this by looking at, just as a general rule, what shows up for you. So like, how do I behave around men if I believe no man can be trusted? How do I behave around women if I think all women are catty or materialistic? How do I believe about, how do I respond or act about commitment when somebody brings up commitment and I believe commitment is unhealthy and it's never going to last anyways, or I'm going to commit and then be hurt long term, or how are these behaviors, these stories, these imprints that you have at a subconscious level, how are they actually directing your life without you realizing it? And what is the cost? Okay. And again, when we look at the cost, usually we find a lot of motive to change. So take the time to journal these things out, and also look at like, what do you emotionally experience when you're having this story come up? So you go into a room full of women at a yoga class, and let's say you're a female and you're trying to make new friends and you believe all women are catty and jealous and judgmental and all these things. What do you feel when you go into that room? You're not like, oh, a yoga class with all these people and it should be so interesting to get to know people and everybody's unique and I want to learn about them. You go in thinking, oh my gosh, this is scary and dangerous. I'm unsafe. I'm being judged right now. That person's judging me. Oh my goodness, they're probably talking about me. They're probably being catty. This is uncomfortable. And you can't friggin' wait to leave the yoga class. And then you're like, why is it so difficult to make friends nowadays? Right? Well, because you've gone in with all of your armor. And so you don't leave room for people to connect. And then you make yourself feel super uncomfortable without realizing it. And none of this is our fault, but it's our responsibility if we want to make the quality of our lives so much better. Okay. So you're looking at like what the stories cost you, what you feel, and then you can take this a step further and ask, what do I make these things mean about me in this last question? So if women are catty, I am unsafe. If men are untrustworthy, I will be betrayed, or I am helpless, or I am unsafe, right? So like, what specific core beliefs do these things also activate, so you can see the deeper layers of your relationship between your stories and the way that they affect you in terms of your self-worth, your self-esteem, your ability to go out into the world and do things. So really taking good inventory here. Okay. So if you ever feel unexplained discomfort around people or situations, or you're like, oh, why is it difficult? I'm having a hard time like breaking through in one of these areas of my life. Like I'm finding myself, struggling, wanting to be interested in commitment and not, or wanting people to commit to me and they're not. Or if I find myself, really getting stuck on vulnerability or conflict or trust, good. Go back, take inventory, plug them in through these steps, and this will help you to move along and move ahead in this specific area. Okay. So I'm going to pause. We're going to answer some questions. Then we're going to start from the top of page 5, and we're going to do exercise 3, how to find a core belief, and really understanding like the deeper layers of core belief retrieval. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, I love this. Kelly's like, it really is. Sorry, I hope I'm allowed to say this. I know you're just typing in the chat. We were very self-reflective on the trip. We could talk about our own personal romantic issues and also reflect back on our relationship. It was very bonding. This is beautiful. Like, these are truly, truly inspiring stories. um, about being like, out of a relationship and then being able to have like a deep friendship and have these like that level of vulnerability is really amazing. Tiffany says underlying needs and how to get them met halfway on my own. Oh, sorry, you're sharing with Tony. Okay, so Gabriella says, oh, sorry, my cursor likes to do the little jumping dance. Okay, so Gabriella says, hi, grateful to be here. Haven't started this course yet and will after codependency and enmeshment, praying for strength to believe in myself. Thank you for all you're doing. That's so sweet. Gabriella, I would recommend doing this course first if you can. Not to like, at the end of the day, you get to make your decisions and choices and navigate, but this course will help so much with a lot of the things that you're moving through and going through, and will help bring insight and clarity into codependency and enmeshment as well. But do what you feel pulled to as well. And thank you for your really kind words, by the way, and I hope you're doing really well today. Okay, so the next question I see, let's see, the next question I see, aw, thank you, Kelly. I'm so grateful. You've been here from the very beginning too, a lot of you guys, and it's so exciting. Thank you so much, Minerva. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Tony. Oh my goodness, you guys are so sweet. I really, really appreciate all of you so much. Thank you. So the workbook, Aprizi, is in if you go to any course, in the very first, if you click on the course on the left-hand side, in the very first like, little module, there'll be a little thing that says workbook, and you can click download. And some of them we have like summary worksheets. We're adding these in-depth course notes to everything over time too. We have people working on those now with like definitions of words that I might use often and just like a little cheat sheet for everything. We have them in a bunch, but not all. So we're going back and putting some additions. Hello, Jessica and Laura and Michelle and Jen and Drew. Hello, how are you? And Claire, hi, and Megan and Deanna. Hello, hello. Okay, so Magni says, I remember exactly how I felt when joining the school 1 year ago. I would have never thought that I could feel what I feel in this very moment. That's so beautiful. That is so, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And that's because you guys work so hard. That's because you came in here, Magni, and I know how hard you worked and how many questions you asked and how much you dove into everything. And so, like, that's you. And I don't want to be like too maternal, but I just, it's so proud to see you at that place and then know that you're going back to school and diving into this stuff and like it's just amazing. I think you're going to make such an impact on so many people. So, and I really believe like when we do a lot of deep work for ourselves, that's what makes us really truly equipped to help other people because it's not speaking from a textbook or something superficial. And not that that can be really beneficial because it can be, but there's such an extra added layer of depth doing so many things for yourself first and understanding, and you can relate and bond and have compassion and empathy for people. I think at a bit of a different level. So congratulations for that. Okay, so let's see the next question. Hold on. So Rochelle. Okay, Rochelle says, as I was working on my belief something is wrong with me, I realized one of the reasons for me having this belief is that I require way too much alone time as compared to the average person. And I was shamed for this in childhood. That's tough, eh? Because it's like you're probably this innocent little kid who's needing alone time because you were getting a little bit of emotional neglect to begin with. And then you get shamed for trying to regulate yourself, which was probably all you were trying to do to feel safe and comfortable and is your natural coping mechanism and adaptation when you're in response to certain lack in childhood, right? So how do I effectively create a cognitive reframe as I cannot find any piece of evidence against this? Okay, great. So this is going to bring us to, and I see Yuval, your comment, hello. And so you guys, just a quick note as well. If you just, I'll try to remember to say this at the beginning of every webinar. If I ever miss a comment, it's because I scroll down through the chat sometimes, and the best way to get seen is to make sure you tag me in it. And I know it's a long thing to type out and we can't change it because it's part of like the actual tag on YouTube, but you can just type at personal development school Thais Gibson and then highlight it and hit Control C so it copies it. So that every time you want to type something, you can just hit Control V and then type, and it's really quick. Okay, so when we talk about this, okay, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just go through the core belief exercise super quickly, and then we'll dive into this because this is like a huge topic. I'll give you a high level answer, and then we'll dive into like some of the deeper stuff. What we want to do when we find ourselves trying to reprogram and getting stuck is we first want to look for the exact opposite. So if it's something is wrong with me, we go into how is something right with me, okay? And at the top of page 7, not to jump ahead too much, but at the top of page 7, this is really outlined. So you'll see this. It's like, okay, what is my interpretation? So my painful limiting belief. So let's say a challenge in my life. Rochelle, if we did this as like a live example, the challenge in life would be I require a lot of alone time and um, and I've been shamed for it, right? So you're looking at like a situation. Especially in my childhood. And then your interpretation interpretation. So what do you make that mean about you? Well, we know because you've shared very eloquently that I made that mean something is wrong with me. Okay, so you pick a situation, you already shared something's wrong with me, so you'd already done the work to find the meaning, and then you explained it backwards. But if you're triggered or something's come up for you and you just want to do this work, you can start by being like, okay, what's the challenge that's showing up for me? Maybe it's something at work or in your relationship. You can write out the challenge just to isolate it. And then you can write, okay, what's the core belief? Oh, something's wrong with me, or I'm not good enough, or whatever it might be in your specific context. So the opposite. So something's right with me. Okay. So I'm going to take you guys through like a little series of steps. So we can always look at this at different angles. So number one, you can look at, okay, what's right with me and look for evidence. Like one of the first things I see is you're regulating, you're coping in whatever way you know how. You probably weren't getting certain emotional needs met. And so you are trying to meet your own needs in your own time, which is beautiful. And that's such an important coping mechanism and probably one that got you through in a lot of ways, right? Like if you didn't have anybody meeting your needs, then what? So you can look at like, that was a healthy adaptation based on the circumstances. You could have acted out, you could have thrown things at your parents and broken things and been like in absolute chaos, but instead you kind of just withdrew to try to protect yourself and meet some of your own needs. And that's, something's right with you. Your brain is equilibrating. You're functioning the way that you should be. You didn't just stop having needs or become a robot, or you learn to find other strategies, which is what we do. Our brain is a needs meeting machine. So you can look at those things, and then you can look at different angles. Okay, so you can find a whole bunch of different pieces. If you take the time to look, you'll find a whole bunch of different other things, like about what else is right with you. Like you can look at, for example, so you're looking into detail. So what did I do in that alone time? Maybe I learned or read, and that is healthy and effective. Maybe I, learned to have compassion and empathy for other people because I felt certain feelings of neglect or pain, and that compassion, empathy is effective and healthy. So you break things down into details, right? To find what was effective about you wanting that, and then in your time spending the time alone, what was effective about it, right? So you're just looking at it from different angles. And then you can question it even further. So you could go, my parents are correct for shaming me about needing alone time. Is it true? Right? Like, what is the opposite there? Like, if I look at, my parents get to determine if I'm defective or not, because that's what you've insinuated here. Like, you've made your parents shaming you mean something's wrong with you. So my parents are, the gold standard for if something's wrong with me or not, or if I was correct for taking the time to do that or not. And not to, we're not trying to beat up somebody's parents, like mentally, emotionally, um, or fault or blame, but we are trying to be honest and take clear inventory. And a lot of trauma gets passed down. So your parents might have gone through their own trauma, but if your parents couldn't provide the proper emotional support, is it really fair to let them be the determinants of your self esteem in terms of how much you shame yourself all the way to this day? They shamed you, and they are correct about not taking alone time. Like, how has your alone time served you over the course of life? How has it made you more independent? How has it helped you through tough times? How have you done really important things in your alone time that have contributed to your life? How has it brought you to this point where you're now working on all those underlying patterns? So my parents shaming me means something's wrong with me. Is that true? Is that valid? Do they get to be the ones to be in charge of, are they, the gold standard for knowing if something's wrong with me or not. And maybe something was happening in their lives that they couldn't show up well. And then because when I'm a little child, you see them like God, or, they're the kings and queens of the household. So you make their opinion the gold standard, but is that really fair? Okay. So you're kind of poking whenever we're trying to change our stories or beliefs, you're going to poke at it from a whole bunch of different angles. And we're going to do some more live examples about this in a little bit when we go through the emotional processing tool that I want to focus on. So we can question it from all these different places. My parents get to decide if something's wrong with me or not. Something is wrong, then I wanted alone time, and you're questioning the whole story. And then, what was right about my alone time in and of itself. So see how we approach it from different perspectives. And like a lot of you can even go so far, this is more general, but you can sort of apply it here. And you can say, like, let's say somebody, you're like, Bob thinks I'm not good enough. Okay. And it's like, okay, so Bob gets to decide whether I'm good enough or not. Is that true? Right. And why? Or I need Bob to think that I'm good enough. I need Bob's approval in order to be good enough. Is that true? And, what are some equilibrating pieces there of evidence? Why does Bob not get to decide my self-esteem and self-worth? Or why do I not need Bob's approval? Right? We spend a lot of time, especially with exes and relationships, being like, I need them to think a certain way. And I've heard this so many times from people, and it's like, I need so and so to think I'm good enough. Why do I not? And going through that can be relieving as well. So it's not just, why am I good enough? What are the qualities I have that make me good enough? But also all the way to, like, I need so and so to think I'm good enough. I need my boss to think I'm good enough. If my boss doesn't think I'm good enough, it means I'm not good enough. Is that true? So you really want to go in and poke at all these little pieces from all these different angles. Okay. We're going to get a lot more into that later. But I just really wanted to share that based on like that story you shared there, if that makes sense. So thank you for that, Rochelle. So Yuval says, I feel reluctant to change my beliefs because I'm afraid to try and fail. Any advice on that? Yes. I do believe there's an exercise in this book that says, like, why are you holding on? And like, what do you believe if you let go? And what can happen is we can have these beliefs upon beliefs. So we can have this fear that if I change my beliefs, I will fail. So you can ask yourself, okay, then I have to work on changing those beliefs in and of it themselves. So what are some reasons? And I can tell you really clearly right now. Our beliefs determine everything else, because our beliefs create patterns of thought, which create emotion, which then create actions. And neuroscience has proven that. So what we believe, everything else will follow in time. And on top of that, so that's reason number one. On top of that, we have our reticular activating system, which is our RAS. And that filters out information according to our beliefs. So if I believe I'm not good enough, I'm going to be hyper focusing on all the times I think I'm not good enough. And when I do have times I'm good enough, I'll probably like be like, oh, that's just lucky. or oh, that's because so and so helped me, or oh, and I'll be discounting those things. And then when we feel not good enough, do we want to take those opportunities? Do we want to take new chances? Do we want to grow? Do we want to put ourselves into new experiences and believe in ourselves to show up and carry things out? Probably not. And so when we have this lack to begin with, everything else will end up following that in some form. And our reticular activating system will be actively filtering out things that could help to benefit our self-esteem, our self-worth. So those are two really important reasons. And lastly, we have a subconscious comfort zone that becomes part of our identity. So if we believe we're not good enough, sometimes we want to hold on to that idea that we're not good enough because it feels safe, it feels normal. And so as a result of trying to maintain that subconscious comfort zone, we can even actively sabotage things that are making us feel good enough. So it's sort of like this can happen in layers if we don't change it. So what I would do is I would change my expectations first. Also, I would go, okay, I'm not going to expect that. I'm not going to put pressure on myself to change everything perfectly. I'm just going to do the work and see what happens without the pressure. Because if I don't have this huge expectation, I don't have to feel like I'm failing against it. If I have no expectation, I can just show up and every day just do a little work and see what happens. But then in terms of the motivation, I would recognize that if I keep the belief that I will try and fail, I'm more likely to fail in all these areas of my life because that's part of my story, part of my identity, part of what my RAS is then tuning into, part of what my subconscious comfort zone is trying to maintain. And that spills out and has a massive ripple effect on all areas of life. So that's how I would work through this. And then I would focus on the reasons you will not fail as like a tertiary component of doing the reprogramming. So great question. So let me see. So Merlin says, hi Thais, is it possible to add more examples to the workbook? I think it might be helpful to visualize the core issues. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. And then I see your second part of your question is, hey Thais, once we start reprogramming about the beliefs and if we stop doing it, is there